Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Douglas Yamato Usher, former professional MMA fighter, and welcome to the second episode of the Therapeutic MMA Podcast. This episode is going to be a little bit difficult for me to do. As some of you know, my co-host, George Kennebrew, passed away 3 days ago, Thursday night. Passed away at his home. I'm not sure of the circumstances, but George is no longer with us. So this episode is dedicated to the life and the memory of my good friend, George Kennebrew. I had my first amateur fight in Johnson City, Tennessee, 2010. First amateur fight was there. Second amateur fight was there. It wasn't until later in my amateur career that I started competing in Georgia, finally. I had a couple of amateur fights here, but majority of them were in Tennessee. But when I turned pro, of course, my first pro fight was in Tennessee. My second pro fight was here in Atlanta at Wild Bill's. Wild Bill's Fight Night. This was 2013. And I fought a guy named Cliff Thompson. Cliff was a collegiate wrestler, and at the time I had just started doing judo. Not even a whole year yet. So I was not good at wrestling at all. And I got laid on for about two rounds. I actually got on top of him, took him down in the second, and got on top of him for a good bit. Controlled the fight a little bit, but ultimately he, re-wrestled me back to the ground. And third round, he took me down, laid on me for about all the way up to 30 seconds. They stood us up. Of course, I won the fight on the feet, but some people said I won the fight. Judges said I lost the fight. So this fight was very famous because Cliff went viral in the back when George interviewed him. And you can find this on YouTube. George Kennebrew interviewed Cliff Thompson at Wild Bill's Fight Night, 2013. And he goes, word for word, "Hey, Cliff, man, Cliff, tell everybody at home about the fight. You just had a 3-round war with Doug Usher, and y'all went at it, man. Y'all went at it. Tell everybody how the fight went, how you feel." And he handed. And Cliff puts his hands on his hips and he sways back and forth, and he goes, and pukes everywhere. And George goes, "Oh, okay, good. Yeah. And I tell you, man, that clip made Jimmy Kimmel. It made ESPN. It made Sports Center, and it went viral online, man. So I was like, George went viral. George and Cliff, and I still tease Cliff to that about that clip and that fight till this day, man. Cliff Thompson up in North Carolina. Good guy. But yeah, that was my introduction to George. And so George interviewed me also after that fight. That's how I first met George. And then over the years, George was still on the scene for a little bit. And then he, whatever happened with him and his, and the MMA mayhem happened. And then he kind of disappeared. And, I continued fighting all the way up until last December 8th, when I, had my first round KO and hung my gloves up. So, me and George did a good bit of back and forth on Facebook about, the Falcons and things like that. Because I'm not the biggest fan of Matt Ryan, never was, still ain't. But I let that go. I buried it. Go Falcons. Go Kirk Cousins. I'm a Kirk Cousins fan. Anyway, But, we got to talking about the Falcons over the years and things like that, man. And then, I got my gym and everything. I had this idea about coming up with a podcast, to interview other fighters and people in the fight community, not just fighters, but people in the karate community, people in the wrestling community, people in the taekwondo, jiu-jitsu, people, just everyone to come on the podcast and tell their story, because nobody gets to hear the stories of the people that didn't make it to the big leagues. Nobody gets to hear our stories. So I reached out to George and told him I wanted to make this podcast about the local people on the regional scene, because to truth be told, especially if you're an MMA fighter, I honestly believe that your hardest fights are on the regional scene, especially if you're fighting out of state a lot, where you're not the hometown guy and people are bringing easy guys in to build these guys up, and then they get to the big leagues and they're 3 and out, like a bad series in football, and they're back on the regional scene. Now they actually have to fight real talent, but nobody gets to hear the guys on the regional scene side, sides. They don't get to hear our stories because a lot of the regional guys don't make it out of the regional scenes. All right. They have a lot of hard fights, and some of these guys have 500 records, but hell, look who they fought. These guys have a story to tell too. So that's what this show is for. And I reached out to George because I remember George was a great media person, and he had a great voice, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of spirit, and he often knew what the hell he was talking about. He did great interviews, and he spoke with his voice. You could hear the passion in that man's voice when he wanted to express how much joy he felt from interviewing people and being in broadcasting with MMA, and just even with pro wrestling too. It was just his joy, his passion. And when I reached out to him and just threw the idea at him, hey, George, man, I want to do this podcast, man. I call it the Therapeutic MMA Podcast. Doug, I like that, Doug. Let's run with that, because we had 2 or 3 other names already. But he wanted to run with that, too. And I was like, I like that, because what we do in this gym is therapy. Period. No matter if you fight or not. It's a release from the day. It's a release from the stress. It's a release from the relationship. It's a release from the job. It's a release from life traumas that's happened. That's what martial arts is. It's not about just going out there and beating up somebody or being able to beat the hell out of somebody. It's not about that. It's about self-discipline, self-control, setting goals, being in shape, and most of all, meditation. It's a form of meditation. That's why it's called Therapeutic MMA. Because in order for someone, I feel, in my heart, to walk into a MMA gym and say that they, or jiu-jitsu gym, or judo gym, or wrestling gym, these are all violent martial arts. You can get seriously injured in any one of these martial arts, especially if you're competing in it. There's a little bit wrong with every last one of us that walk in these doors and say we want to sign up for this. Something happened to every last one of us. Majority of us, yeah. So this is a release. And George was in lockstep with me, word for word. So I ran it by him on Messenger, and he was down with it. We exchanged numbers. We started talking on the phone. Come to find out, George and I went to Creekside High School. Same school. We continued to talk. Come to find out, we went through the same thing. Had to wear not the best of clothes. They were nice clothes, but they weren't name brand. So we got made fun of. Got talked down to. Women didn't like us. Girls didn't like us because all the cool guys talked down to us. The only difference between me and George in high school was I ended up lifting weights, and I put an end to a lot of that real quick. Once I started putting some muscle on and lifting weights and realized I had a really good left hand, started putting an end to a lot of that stuff. So me and George talked about that, and I sat there and I listened to that man break down and cry. For about a good 20, 25 minutes about what he went through high school. The same exact thing I went through. So we sat there. We talked about it. We both got emotional over it because it's trauma. It's trauma. And for me, that's a lot of the reason why when I fought and I knocked people out and I looked down at them as they laid there unconscious and I just walked off to the corner, you guys never seen me celebrate when I defeated somebody. I never, ever celebrated in the ring. I didn't even celebrate after the fight. I wouldn't even go out and have a drink or anything like that until maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks later. Because fighting was therapy for me. Plus, it was spiritual for me. That's why I never celebrated. Because I know what it feels like to be that person laid out in front of his friends and family, everybody pointing and laughing at that person, making fun of that person. I know what that feels like. That's why I never celebrated. That's why I would get down on my knees, try to hold them, try to consult them, try to be their friend immediately, because I know what that feels like to be embarrassed in front of thousands of people. I know what that feels like. So me and George, we agreed on that, man, and he wanted to run the show. And he told me how ecstatic he was. He called me and told me, Doug, I'm so happy that you reached out to me. You could have went and got anybody else, man. I never thought I would get the opportunity to ever do anything like this again. I thought it was dead. I thought it was gone. I was done with it. And he said, you brought it back to me and you made me feel alive again. And he thanked me profusely and told me how happy it made him. I didn't realize the magnitude of it until last night when I set everything up, because George was supposed to be here in that seat filming with me, filming the second episode. George Kennebrew was a good man. He was a great musician, played the hell out of some drums. He had such a strong voice and passion for what he loved to do, and that was broadcasting. So to George, rest in power, my good brother. I'm very happy that I got the chance to make you feel alive again. I know you wanted the show to go on. That's why the show's going on. And hey, thank you for everything. You have inspired me to continue to go forward with this. Thank you for everything, George Kennebrew. May you rest in power, my good brother, I say.